What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for The Flash, Season 6, Episode 8, titled The Last Temptation of Barry Allen, Part 2. This episode is a lot of things. It's the second parter to the first part, which was one of the best episodes of The Flash in a very, very long time. In fact, the best episode in a couple years. It's also the last pre-crisis episode, the last episode before the crisis, as well as the mid-season finale. Not only is it the mid-season finale, but it's also a special kind of mid-season finale in the fact that they're beating the main villain here. It's basically a season finale, which is a lot of things to accomplish, a lot of things they needed to live up to, and for the most part, I think they accomplish everything. I don't think this episode is as good as the first part, but it doesn't really need to be. The first part was definitely very different. It focused more on Barry and the mind games that Bloodwork was playing with him. This episode was the conclusion to that. It had more of the negative Flash, which they do call Dark Flash in this episode, and also the fights between Bloodwork himself, which is all really cool. It's a little bit worse than the last part. Either way, it's a great mid-season finale, a great final episode before the crisis, and I'll talk about all of that in this review. So with the last episode taking place 2 days before the crisis, this episode takes place a day before. In fact, a little bit of it takes place during the crisis, which is really exciting, and I'll get to that at the end of this review. But it begins right after the end of the last episode. This could have been just like a continuation of the last episode where there's no break, which is, I guess, why it's called Part 2 and not a completely different episode. But there, it begins with Team Flash, mainly Cisco and Iris, reacting to Barry becoming the negative Flash, which Cisco calls the Dark Flash, which it makes sense. It's the Dark Flash. It wouldn't really make sense if it was the negative Flash, because there's no negative Speed Force energy happening here. So canonically, in universe, Dark Flash surely makes a lot more sense, or Blood Flash or something like that. But the fact that it's based off negative Flash, it's just, that's what the fan base has been calling it this entire time. It's just a little bit weird for them to call it something different, for them to call it Dark Flash now. But maybe they're giving us the opportunity, maybe opening the door for negative Flash, where Barry is infected by the negative Speed Force, maybe with a different design, to appear sometime in the future, maybe in a storyline where Thawne returns. But either way, this, like I said, a great start to the episode as it continues right from Part 1's ending, and they waste basically no time getting right into it. And then we see Cecile and Camilla, which I'm going to talk about this whole storyline right here, because basically the entirety of the storyline is all really the same thing as each other, and nothing really, like, big happens. The whole thing is just Cecile and Camilla trying to escape from their building, which is overrun by Blood Brothers. Now, I don't know if Blood Brothers itself, the term, is a reference to Brother Blood, because it's literally just that name, but reversed and made plural, because the name Blood Brothers is not what I would have called them. In fact, in my trailer breakdown, I called them blood creatures, but they're not exactly, they're people, so maybe blood people or something. Blood Brothers is not exactly what I would have expected, especially since some of them are not brothers. Some of them are, or would be, sisters, since they're women, so maybe this is some sort of nod to Brother Blood. But anyway, this storyline, while it is following Cecile, and it is kind of filler for the most part, like, it doesn't necessarily need to exist in this episode, it's actually pretty good. The way they shot it, the way they used the Blood Brothers, the way they even used Cecile's powers for her to avoid the Blood Brothers, it's all legitimately a little bit scary, and I think they just shot it very, very, very well, as there's like barely any cuts in certain parts of the storyline, which works so well for the scary part, for the legitimately disturbing or creepy parts of this storyline, which this season has focused on quite a lot. Firstly with the Halloween episode, then the last episode, and now this episode with Dark Flash himself, as well as this storyline. So yeah, while this does definitely follow Cecile, it is probably the first Cecile storyline in the history of this show where it mainly focuses on her to be actually really good, even if it is filler, as it's legitimately scary at times, and it works to enhance the threat that is the Blood Brothers and Bloodwork himself. Then we see Nash, and this is what we've been seeing the whole time in all these episodes. We saw it on Batwoman, on Supergirl. After this episode, we saw it yet again on Arrow, a scene where Nash, in this underground place with the Eternium Wall, with the logos, talking to the Monitor, saying how the Monitor helped save him, and then he's engulfed in light. None of these scenes, what we saw, it seemed like he was becoming pariah, but we didn't get the context for them at all. And legitimately, after watching this episode, it makes less sense to me now why they put those scenes in Batwoman, Supergirl, and Arrow when it's legitimately just a scene from the Flash. It's not like it connects to the Flash, but also it's like a big crisis setup scene that would make sense for the other episodes. It legitimately makes no sense to me at all why they put that scene in those episodes and not just have it at the end of this episode and nothing else. Because before, when we saw it 2 days ago or 2 days before this episode aired on Batwoman and Supergirl, those scenes just didn't have the full context. However, in this episode, we do learn the full context, which is that Nash goes to this underground place again, talks to the wall, and Novu talks back to him. But the way Novu talks, it definitely does not seem like Mar-Novu. He tells Nash to bow down to him. The way he's talking, it does not sound like Mar-Novu at all. In fact, this episode might be the debut of the Anti-Monitor. The Anti-Monitor is obviously the evil counterpart to the Monitor and the main villain of the Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline in the comics and the upcoming crossover, and this might have been his debut. This might have been the episode, the scene where the Anti-Monitor, at least with his voice, made his big debut, and we don't even know it yet, as the show is trying to paint this as Mar-Novu, but the way he's talking, it definitely sounds more like it would be Mobius, the Anti-Monitor, if that's even his name in this universe or this multiverse. We don't know yet, but it definitely sounds like the Anti-Monitor, which is really cool because this is basically his first appearance. So after the first scene with Cecile and Camilla, we see the city being overrun by the quote-unquote Blood Brothers with Ramsey and the Flash, or Bloodwork, using the Flash to infect all of these people, which Dark Flash is really obviously very creepy himself, which we see a lot more of a little bit later after the Nash scene that I already talked about, where Barry calls Iris, and while Cisco tries to talk her out of it, Iris goes in anyway, goes to her home, where Dark Flash is waiting for her, and this is like one of the creepiest, one of the scariest scenes of the Flash ever, where Iris is standing there, but the Dark Flash runs up to her, and it legitimately feels like he's gonna kill her, even though we already know she's not going to die because we see that she's in the crossover, and also this would be a very unusual time to kill her. It's just how creepy they made Dark Flash, which I guess that's what I'm calling him now. It's really weird that he's not Negative Flash anymore, but whatever. He's just really creepy, and even though it was only for like this episode and a tiny bit in the last episode, I think they definitely used this concept very well. And when it comes to a villainous Barry Allen, this has got to be the best they've ever done, which they've only ever done it once before, but I gotta say Dark Flash is better than Savitar, or for at least being a very creepy villain. And speaking of really creepy villains, there's Ramsey Rosso, aka Bloodwork, and with this episode being his season finale, he enacts his master plan, which involves, while Central City and a couple members of Team Flash, including Joe and Frost, are being occupied by the Blood Brothers, he's going to get into Star Labs, use the particle accelerator, put a sample of his blood in there, and infect the entirety of Central City, all while using the Dark Flash to his advantage. While doing this, and during the storyline, like I said, Frost and Joe fight the Blood Brothers in an okay fight scene, but it's a little weird that both of these characters who have projectile powers or weapons are punching these Blood Brothers, and while Joe does get injured, and that I guess does make the Blood Brothers more than just cannon fodder. They could actually injure one of the people and one of the characters and maybe even kill them, which the latter part doesn't actually happen, but it's a little weird that these characters are just punching them, especially when Frost, in the end, takes all of them out by herself in one blast. Just why couldn't she do that earlier? However, in terms of a character not using their powers in the right way, this is like the only time that ever happens in this episode, while the Flash seems very powerful, especially once he gets his powers back, and I'll get to that later in this review. So throughout the episode, Cisco was creating this device that would sever the connection between Bloodwork and the Flash, or I guess uninfect the Flash, or even if it hit Bloodwork, uninfect the entirety of Central City. But this doesn't work because the Flash himself doesn't let this happen. However, while Dark Flash wasn't able to resist what Bloodwork was telling him, which was either attack Cisco or destroy the device, he was able to give Team Flash some sort of idea, as he said certain things that Dark Flash wouldn't really say, or Bloodwork wouldn't say, and Barry would, so he was still somewhere in there. It was later revealed that the Flash actually was infected by Bloodwork on purpose. which is an actually really interesting twist that honestly makes Barry Allen or the Flash seem way more badass. It was before I thought it was either that he was overpowered, the infection overpowered the Speed Force, or he even gave in because he doesn't want to die and he was convinced not to. It turns out he just had this idea to take Bloodwork out from the inside by being infected, which is something that Barry Allen in the past could never have thought of on his own, but now with all of this experience and with this better writing that they have now, Barry Allen just has this more initiative that he's taking. Not only that, but he's also a lot more badass with his powers for the most part, and it's just really awesome to see that. So I like that twist a lot. I like that they did that, and all these hints from Dark Flash to Team Flash, giving them the idea to take off the blast shields or the force field that Cisco put up so that Bloodwork can come in, so that in the end the Flash can take down Bloodwork from the inside. It's all just really interesting, and I really like how that all played out. So, Bloodwork now at Star Labs enacting his master plan. All this is happening while Frost is operating on Joe, who was attacked and hit and injured by the Blood Brothers earlier, which I don't really understand where this is all going, this whole Frost storyline. But recently, I think that I didn't see this in my last review, I never even got to this, but I think that her storyline right now, where she's having trouble with the medical side of all of these things, and even now where she's needed for that, it actually humanizes her quite a lot. And while I don't think Frost will ever be as good a character as Caitlin, I do like the strides they're taking to at least make her more human, make her more three-dimensional than she has been in the past. But getting back to Bloodwork, he tries to infect Central City by putting the blood sample in the particle accelerator while in the particle accelerator room, which I gotta say, this room, in this season at least, just so visually appealing. I don't know why, like something changed about the lighting, or maybe something changed about the set of this room. It just looks so good now, especially highlighting the Flash's costume, which the last time we were in here, we didn't see Flash in his costume. Barry was just wearing regular clothing, although I think Frost was wearing her costume or something, but either way, this is just a very visually appealing room, especially with the Flash's costume. But in this scene, Cisco and Iris are brought to the particle accelerator room by Dark Flash, ordered by Bloodwork, and he even orders him to kill Iris, which Dark Flash resists, which is showing a part of Barry resisting the Dark Flash, and that was really the end of Dark Flash. Now we saw him resisting killing Iris. It was very clear that that was going to be the last thing we see of Dark Flash, which, again, I gotta say, in this episode, he was super creepy, and I think they used him very well. So this is where Barry's plan mostly unfolds, where Iris shoots Bloodwork, who then escapes, and Team Flash use Allegra to get rid of the blood in the particle accelerator, but also uninfect the entirety of Central City, including Dark Flash, which all works, and I really like how they incorporate Allegra into the storyline. It really gives her a purpose, because other than like being on Team Citizen, she hasn't had really much of a purpose this season. Like, she debuted, there was the whole thing with her cousin, but then she was just a member of Team Citizen, as they called it in the last episode, and she hasn't done anything in terms of helping Team Flash, but I'm guessing this was her purpose the entire time. This is why she was brought onto the show and why she was a recurring character this entire time, so she could have this big moment where she helps uninfect the entirety of Central City, and also basically inadvertently start the crisis, it seems, with how it connects to Pariah, which, if that's true, then I really like how they incorporated the start of Crisis into the Bloodwork storyline even more than I expected. Obviously, there was already the thing of Bloodwork trying to help Barry survive the crisis, or try to convince him to be infected using the crisis, but it seems like the Bloodwork storyline might have directly started the crisis, as Nash thinks that he's saved by the Monitor, who again I think is the Anti-Monitor, and that leads directly into the scene we saw in the previous episodes of Supergirl and Batwoman, and we also later see on Arrow, and also in this episode, which is Nash thanking the Monitor, again I think it's the Anti-Monitor, for saving his life and then accepting his fate in this Eternium wall. This might have inadvertently started the crisis, as maybe the Anti-Monitor is stuck or imprisoned in this wall, in this cage, in this prison or something, and Nash just let him go. This also could be him becoming Pariah, which was theorized once the scene came out 2 or 3 days ago with Batwoman and Supergirl, and that definitely fits the crisis, with Pariah starting the crisis, or at least thinking he did. It might be the latter, because that was true in the comics, but also in the Arrowverse, Earth 2 was already destroyed by the crisis, so maybe he just thinks he started it, even though it already began. But either way, it's really interesting, and I'm definitely interested to see where they take that in the actual crossover. But with Dark Flash being uninfected by Bloodwork and Bloodwork escaping, we then get the final fight between the Flash and Bloodwork, and it's actually awesome. We get Bloodwork's final form, which is not only red, thank God, it's also creepy and very well done with the CGI, which I don't think is amazing CGI, but it didn't really have to be, as it's a very short fight scene, and the fact that it's such a creepy design definitely is enough for the CGI that is definitely still CW level, low budget-ish CGI, and I think for what they're given, they did a really good job. But not only that, the design for Bloodwork is, I think, as good as it could have been. It is red, which again, thank God, because this whole time it's been black. His powers have been black. It's like, it looks more like sludge than blood, which made sense because, especially when it comes to making the Dark Flash look exactly like the Negative Flash, and if it was red, it wouldn't really not only look like the Negative Flash, it just wouldn't add anything to the costume, which is already red. However, with this final form, it just would have made no sense to make it black, but also we wouldn't be able to see it since this fight takes place at night, which for tactical reasons that would definitely give Bloodwork an advantage. But in terms of being looking cool, looking comic accurate, and looking as good as possible, I'm so glad they went with red. Not only that, it's a very creepy, very, very well done design. Aside from the actual design of Bloodwork, I really like this fight scene. It is definitely short and also very one-sided, where the hero is not really given much of a threat. Bloodwork is mainly not really a physical threat to the Flash. That's not a bad thing at all. There's a reason most of Bloodwork's main threat level in this season so far, or the entirety of the season, has been mental, like mind games, as we saw in the last episode, as in terms of a one-on-one fight, a big blood monster, like in the comics, doesn't really stand a chance at all against a speedster. Most villains, other than speedsters themselves, and maybe characters who are able to slow down time or slow down speedsters, shouldn't really put up much of a fight for speedsters, so I'm glad that here, Barry beats Bloodwork pretty easily. The fight starts with Bloodwork turning into a big blood monster. Bloodwork gets his one and only hit in this entire fight, but this doesn't really do much to Barry. He's sent across the street, but he lands on his feet and just gets right back into the game, which it's such a cool moment. In any other fight, in any other season really, like either an unexperienced Barry or a Flash that's a part of a poorly written season would just land on his back or something and would be hurt by this. This Barry, who is just so much more badass than we've ever seen before, lands on his feet and gets right back into it, runs right back to Bloodwork and beats him up and takes him down pretty easily. It's only because he doesn't know where to put Bloodwork that Bloodwork is able to continue doing anything. And however, then Barry yet again takes the initiative and uses Ramsey's doubts, uses his whole plan of being infected by Barry by Bloodwork to use his doubts, which is mostly his mother against him. And then once Ramsey's guard is down, he vibrates out of the webbing or the blood that he's pinned down by and runs him right to the place that he's putting him in to stop him. It's just, Barry is so badass here, and they really use the speedster powers to their most. I mean, not their most. Obviously, the Enter Flash Time episode would be their most, but in terms of this big villain that Barry is able to not only pretty casually defeat, but also he thinks of a plan to beat him. It's as smart as Barry should be. It's as powerful as Barry should be, and this is the Flash, which is why I love this fight scene so much. I also absolutely have to say that Bloodwork has got to be one of the best villains on this show ever. Not only is his motivation very good, the acting's great, the creepy dialogue and delivery he's given in this season is top-notch, but also his final form is really, really well done. I think that it's really just Thawne and Zoom, maybe Season 1 Captain Cold, that are better than Bloodwork, easily better than Savitar, the Thinker, way better than the two Cicadas, and better than like Grodd and King Shark and all of those other villains who only appear for a little bit or in a couple episodes. Bloodwork is one of the best villains on this show, and I have to give them props for creating yet another great main villain, which the Flash hasn't done in a very long time, since Season 2, and it's really just been recently Arrow, maybe a little bit from Legends of Tomorrow, even a little bit from Supergirl, that had great villains like Prometheus, the Legion of Doom, as well as Reign and Lex Luthor, or at least Lex Luthor himself. But finally, after Zoom, we haven't really gotten much from the Flash, but finally we get yet another great villain in Bloodwork, so props to them for that. And the episode ends with Team Flash all talking to Barry. It's very emotional as they're all giving him their farewells, which is just so well done. Again, Grant Gustin's acting here, just like in the last episode, is really, really top-notch, and this is a very emotional scene. And then the crisis begins. In conclusion, while this episode I don't think is necessarily as good as the first part, it's still such a great episode, and this is such a great two-parter. It's a very well done mid-season finale, and it kind of functions as a season finale, which it does such a great job at that. It's creepy at times, it's genuinely scary, Dark Flash is really, really cool, Bloodwork is an awesome villain, and the pre-crisis setup is great in this episode as well. So again, not nearly as good as the last episode, but it's not that much worse either, and I'll give it a 9.7 out of 10. But let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments down below. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.